Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was barely rising over Manhattan, and the city was waking up to a jumble of sirens, horns, and hurried footsteps. In the imposing shadow of the federal courthouse, a young man walked confidently, despite the weight of pressure on his shoulders. Marcus Williams, just 26, adjusted his black tie and took a deep breath. Today was no ordinary day. He would be defending a man wrongly accused of financial fraud against one of the largest companies in the country. In the courtroom, whispers circulated, "He's the young prodigy everyone's talking about." Some still doubted that such a young lawyer could stand up to the arrogance and experience of prestigious firms. But Marcus wasn't impressed. From a young age, he had learned to turn every obstacle into an opportunity. Every night spent studying the law, every competition won, every complex case analyzed, had prepared him for this precise moment. Judge Harrison, known for his uncompromising temperament and skepticism toward young lawyers, took his seat in the courtroom. Marcus knew that it wasn't just his client he had to convince today, but the entire court as well. Silence fell as the judge rapped his gavel. All eyes turned to the young black lawyer, who, with an almost insolent calm, looked up and replied with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, I am ready to demonstrate that truth can triumph, even against giants." And in this courtroom, where appearances and prejudices had often spoken louder than justice, Marcus Williams would prove that intelligence, perseverance and courage could overturn all expectations. Marcus Williams sat at his tiny desk in a modest corner of the firm where he worked as a junior partner. In front of him sat a thick file, along with a stack of yellowing documents and printed emails. His client, Anthony Carter, a black man in his 40s, had been accused of financial fraud by an influential multinational, the prestigious Langford and Company. All the experienced lawyers had declined the case. Langford and Company's reputation and the complexity of the evidence seemed insurmountable. For many, Anthony Carter was already doomed before the trial even began. But Marcus saw something no one else saw, a flaw in the documents, an inconsistency in the dates, a detail that could change everything. "Marcus, are you sure?" his assistant, Jenna, asked, frowning. "Absolutely," he replied calmly. "Everyone sees walls, Jenna. I see hidden doors." He had spent days analyzing every contract, every banking transaction, every signature. The documents seemed damning at first glance: unusual transfers, missing emails, banking evidence that seemed irrefutable. But Marcus had fine-tuned instincts and implacable logic. And he had discovered what no one else had noticed: a key document had been forged by the company itself. This discovery changed everything. If Marcus could prove it in court, the case could swing in his client's favor. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. The lawyers at Langford and Company were known for their arrogance and their ability to intimidate any junior lawyer. And Judge Harrison, known for his skepticism, wouldn't be impressed by a 26-year-old prodigy. Despite this, Marcus felt an excitement he had never known before. The adrenaline, stress, and responsibility fueled his strategic thinking. He began organizing his notes, preparing his arguments, and imagining every step of the trial, anticipating his opponent's every move. "You have to be impeccable, Marcus," Jenna said. "One false step and all is lost." "I know," he replied with a calm smile. "But Anthony Carter deserves this chance. And I'm going to give it to him, no matter what the world thinks." Evening was falling on New York, but for Marcus, the night was only just beginning. Every detail had to be mastered, every piece of evidence analyzed. And in this unequal struggle between a determined young lawyer and an arrogant multinational corporation, Marcus knew that only his insight could change his client's fate. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office early, before the sun had fully illuminated the Manhattan skyscrapers. The city was already buzzing, but he was focused on a single goal: finding the flaw that would bring down the impeccable facade of Langford and Company. He spread the documents out on his desk, his fingers gliding over the sheets like a pianist over the keys. Every email, every transaction, every contractual clause had to be analyzed with surgical precision. It was a game of patience, observation, and logic. And Marcus loved these moments when everything rested on his mind. He reread the file over and over again. Then he came across a detail no one had noticed. A signature on a key document seemed slightly off, as if it had been copied and pasted. His heart raced. This was the weak point he was looking for. If this document was indeed forged, Langford and Company's entire case could be discredited. Marcus spent the day checking every piece of evidence, witness contacts, bank statements, internal correspondence. He discreetly contacted a former employee of the company, who confirmed his suspicions. Some documents had been altered after the fact to incriminate Anthony Carter. This evidence was flimsy, but sufficient to be used cautiously in court. "It's perfect," Marcus murmured, putting down the phone. "It's all there. But we have to be methodical. One misstep and we're finished." He drew up a strategy. 1. Gently introduce the evidence before the judge without the opponent suspects nothing. 2. Construct a clear and logical argument, point by point, to show the falsification. 3. Prepare counterarguments for each possibility objection. Each scenario was simulated in his mind. Marcus spoke aloud, rehearsed his sentences, and anticipated the reactions of Judge Harrison and the opposing team. His concentration was such that he seemed isolated from the outside world, absorbed only in the battle that awaited him. As night fell, Jenna, his assistant, entered timidly with coffee. "You should rest a little, Marcus." "Not now," he replied with a slight smile. "Rest will come after justice is done. Anthony deserves that. And I will not fail." In that moment of calm and tension, Marcus knew that everything would play out in the coming hours. The truth was there, right in front of him. All that remained was to reveal it in court, and show everyone that even a young black lawyer could outwit the greatest giants with intelligence, courage, and insight. On the day of the trial, Marcus rose before dawn. He adjusted his black tie and impeccable sleeves one last time. His reflection in the mirror displayed a mixture of calm and determination. Today, everything was going to change. As he entered the federal courthouse, the grandeur of the courtroom struck him as never before. The dark woodwork, the tall windows letting in golden light, and the solemn layout of the room created an almost intimidating atmosphere. Murmurs could be heard from the spectators as everyone turned to watch the young black lawyer who was about to plead. Facing him, the Langford and Company lawyers looked perfectly at ease, dressed in tailored suits and smiling condescendingly. Their arrogance was palpable. Marcus felt a slight thrill of adrenaline, but he didn't let it show. Judge Harrison then entered, imposing, upright in his high chair, observing every detail with a piercing gaze. Known for his severity and skepticism towards young lawyers, he glanced at Marcus and sketched a crooked, almost mocking smile. "Mr. Williams," said the judge, his voice echoing throughout the room, "you are very young to be defending such a complex case. Are you sure you are up to the task?" Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes meeting the judge's without hesitation. "Your Honor," he replied calmly, "age and appearance do not determine the truth. I am here to see justice done. And I am prepared to demonstrate that my client deserves to be heard and exonerated." A murmur ran through the room. The lawyers for Langford and Company exchanged surprised glances, while Judge Harrison raised his eyebrows slightly, intrigued. As closing arguments began, Marcus spoke with a precision and clarity that immediately captivated the jury. He stated the facts, exposed the inconsistencies, and delicately introduced his evidence, setting the stage for the crucial revelation. His voice was firm but measured, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. Even the most skeptical began to pay attention. Every move, every argument, was calculated to demonstrate not only his client's innocence, but also the multinational's fraud. The opposing lawyer's initial sneers turned into palpable tension. Marcus could feel the weight of doubt settling in his opponent's minds. When he finished this first intervention, a respectful silence fell over the room. Judge Harrison, usually unwavering, frowned and remained silent, his mouth half open. Marcus had managed to capture his attention. In that moment, he knew the battle was only just beginning. But Marcus Williams had just proven that intelligence, preparation, and determination could shake the strongest walls of arrogance and prejudice. And for Anthony Carter, it was the first sign that justice might finally have a chance. The tension in the courtroom rose when the lawyers for Langford and Company took the floor. Their leader, a man in his 50s named Charles Whitmore, addressed the judge in a condescending tone. "Your Honor, we must point out that Mr. Williams is very young and inexperienced. He seems to be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the case and could, despite his intentions, mislead the court." The murmurs in the room grew louder. Some spectators exchanged skeptical glances, as if wondering if this young black lawyer could really stand up to one of the biggest firms in the city. Marcus remained calm, almost impassive. He knew these attacks weren't personal, but calculated to unsettle him. Every word, every look, every gesture from his opponent was a test. He took a deep breath and stood slowly, his posture straight and confident. "Your Honor," he said in a firm but measured voice, "experience is not measured solely by years of experience, but by the ability to analyze facts with clarity and logic. I am here to defend my client based on the evidence and the truth." A silence fell over the room. Judge Harrison stared at him, intrigued, but Marcus didn't avoid his gaze. He knew that any sign of hesitation would be exploited by the opposing team. Whitmore raised his eyebrows and gave a condescending smile. "We will see if your insight is enough to counter our documents and testimonies." Marcus gave a small smile. He didn't need to reply further for now. His strategy was clear: let his opponent's arrogance turn against them, and strike at the precise moment when the decisive evidence would be introduced. Then Marcus began to present the inconsistencies in the case, point by point. His way of connecting dates, signatures, and transactions was so methodical that even the jury members began to take careful notes. Langford and Company's lawyers tried to interrupt, but each objection was calmly and logically neutralized by Marcus, who had anticipated all their strategies. With each intervention, he gained Judge Harrison's silent respect a little more. His initial skepticism slowly transformed into attentive curiosity. And although some in the room doubted him because of his age and skin color, Marcus demonstrated that his intelligence and mastery of the case surpassed all prejudices. At the end of the session, as he sat back down, Marcus knew the real battle had yet to begin. But the first hurdle, doubts and prejudices, had been overcome. He had proven that, in the face of injustice and stereotypes, self-belief and preparation could overwhelm even the most powerful opponents. On the third day of the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Langford and Company's lawyers were on the defensive, their arrogant smiles giving way to palpable tension. Marcus knew the decisive moment was approaching. He had to strike with precision and clarity. He stood, adjusted his tie, and walked slowly to the center of the room, each step calculated to attract attention. Judge Harrison looked up from his notes and regarded Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The silence became almost palpable. "Your Honor," Marcus began, "we have discovered a key document that was falsified by the opposing party to falsely accuse my client." Whitmore, the multinational's lead lawyer, frowned. "I protest. This is a serious accusation, without tangible proof." Marcus smiled slightly. "Let me present the evidence to you," he said, placing a document on the judge's desk. "Note the differences in the signatures and the date, which we were able to verify using the company's original records." Calmly and precisely, Marcus demonstrated, step by step, how the document had been falsified. Every inconsistency, every alteration, every detail was laid out clearly. The jury watched attentively, their eyes wide. The murmurs in the room had died down. Judge Harrison, usually unwavering, remained silent, mouth slightly open, unable to hide his astonishment. He looked at Marcus, then at the document, then back at Marcus. Every word, every demonstration of logic, seemed to surprise him more. Whitmore attempted to counterattack, trying to downplay the evidence, but Marcus had anticipated every objection. With calm and authority, he dismantled every opposing argument point by point. His mastery of the case, his precision, and his lucidity left little room for doubt. At the end of his presentation, a heavy silence reigned in the room. Even the assistants and interns at Langford and Company seemed stunned. Judge Harrison, visibly impressed, lightly rapped his gavel. "I must admit," he began, his voice betraying a rare surprise, "that the argument presented by Mr. Williams is irrefutable." The spectators' murmur turned into a respectful silence. Marcus returned to his seat, his heart pounding but his face impassive. He had succeeded. He had just turned a near-lost case around and proven that truth, logic, and preparation could defeat even the most powerful opponents. Anthony Carter, sitting in the front row, his eyes shone with gratitude. To him, Marcus was no longer just a young prodigy lawyer, he was a champion of his justice system. And in the courtroom, a young black lawyer had just left a judge known for being unshakable, literally speechless. The silence in the courtroom was almost palpable as Judge Harrison stood to announce the verdict. All eyes were on him, but some of the tension had shifted. Marcus had now earned the respect of nearly everyone in the room. After carefully considering all the evidence and arguments presented, the judge began, his voice resonating with gravity. "It is clear that the key document was falsified and that the plaintiff was never involved in the alleged fraudulent acts." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. The lawyers from Langford and Company exchanged surprised glances, as if they had never considered this possibility. Therefore, the judge continued, "Mr. Anthony Carter is acquitted of all charges against him." The silence gave way to an explosion of relief. Anthony Carter stood up slowly, his eyes brimming with tears, unable to utter a word. He squeezed Marcus's hand with a strength that was a mixture of emotion and gratitude. thank you so much," he murmured, his voice trembling. Judge Harrison, for his part, looked at Marcus with a mixture of admiration and surprise. The young lawyer, despite his age and background, had not only defended his client brilliantly, but had also defied all prejudices and expectations. The journalists present frantically took notes, aware that they had witnessed a rare moment in legal history. Some were already whispering, "The young black lawyer who humiliated the multinational," or "the prodigy who left the judge speechless." Marcus remained calm, as if he had just performed a normal task. But in his heart, he knew that this day would change his life forever. His client was free, justice had prevailed, and he had just proven that skill and determination overcome all obstacles. As he left the courtroom, Marcus met Judge Harrison's gaze one last time. The judge inclined his head slightly, a discreet but respectful gesture. Marcus smiled inwardly. He had won more than a case, he had earned recognition that was measured not just in honors, but in impact and justice served. The next morning, Marcus entered the office with a strange feeling. The world outside had changed overnight. Notifications on his phone were piling up at a frenetic pace, news articles, emails from journalists, congratulatory messages from colleagues and prominent lawyers. The young black lawyer who had left a supposedly unshakable judge speechless was now on everyone's lips. The titles were eloquent. The 26-year-old prodigy who humiliated a multinational. Marcus Williams, the lawyer who redefines justice. The young black lawyer who makes Wall Street tremble. Jenna, her assistant, kept smiling as she read the articles aloud. "Look at this, Marcus. Even the big firms are inviting you to join them. You could choose any position." "I know," he replied calmly. "But that's not what motivates me. I want to continue defending those who have no one to defend them." The victory had also strengthened his reputation among potential clients. Complex, high-profile cases were beginning to arrive, and he knew that each new victory would be an opportunity to transform the system, one case at a time. However, Marcus was not blinded by sudden fame. He knew that recognition was a double-edged sword, it attracted admiration, but also jealousy and criticism. He had to remain vigilant, focused, and true to his principles. That evening, he joined Anthony Carter for a low-key celebratory dinner. "I don't know how to thank you, Marcus," Anthony said, his eyes shining with gratitude. "You don't owe me anything," Marcus replied with a smile. "Justice is its own reward. But I'm glad you can finally breathe freely." That night, as the city shone with 1,000 lights, Marcus realized that this victory wasn't just his, it belonged to all those who still believed that truth could triumph, even in the face of the most powerful obstacles. And somewhere deep down, He knew this was only the beginning. A few weeks after Marcus Williams' resounding victory, the door to his office opened to reveal a young lawyer with a determined look. "Marcus Williams?" she asked, brandishing a thick file. "My name is Rachel Bennett. I have an urgent matter to propose to you, and believe me, it's delicate." Marcus looked up from his notes and studied the young woman. Sensitive cases were his specialty, but he knew this one would be different, high-profile, complex, and with very high stakes. "Explain it to me," he said calmly, inviting Rachel to sit down. She told him the story. A major tech company had wrongfully fired several black employees on false grounds, and the media was already starting to pick up on it. The top executives were arrogant, self-assured, and ready to crush anyone who tried to challenge them. Marcus smiled inwardly. Every time he encountered injustice, he felt an adrenaline rush that drove him to excel. It wasn't fame or money that motivated him, but the opportunity to restore fairness and show that courage and intelligence could overcome arrogance and corruption. "Very well," he said, taking the file. "Prepare all the documents, witnesses, and evidence for me. We're going to make sure this case doesn't end like the others." In the following weeks, Marcus immersed himself in preparation, just as he had done with Anthony Carter. He analyzed every email, every contract, every bank statement, and created a meticulous plan to demonstrate the injustice suffered by the employees. His determination and attention to detail were intact, and his reputation was now opening doors that had been closed to him in the past. On the day of the trial, Marcus entered the courtroom with the same poise and confidence as he had during his first major victory. The opposing lawyers, confident and arrogant, judged him at a glance, unaware of the experience he had accumulated since his last case. But Marcus knew that the real battle would not be fought simply over documents or laws, but over his ability to convince the judge and jury of the truth. As he adjusted his tie and prepared to plead, he thought of all those who were counting on him. Each previous victory was just one step toward this mission, to change the system, one case at a time, with intelligence, courage, and perseverance. And Marcus Williams, the young prodigy lawyer, was ready for this new challenge. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat on makeshift platforms, cameras focused on every detail. Marcus Williams's lawsuit against the tech company was already making headlines and national news channels. For Marcus, this wasn't just a legal case, it was a battle for honor and justice for several unfairly dismissed employees. From the opening of the arguments, the opposing lawyers adopted an aggressive strategy. They attempted to discredit Marcus, pointing to his age and relative experience in high-profile cases. But Marcus, unflappable, responded with the same clarity and precision for which he had become famous. Each argument was methodically dismantled, each attempt at intimidation elegantly neutralized. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "these employees were victims of decisions based not on their skills or performance, but on internal bias and manipulation. We have evidence that the termination documents were falsified and that senior managers lied under oath. The evidence was overwhelming: forged emails, internal memos contradicting executive testimony, and testimony from colleagues willing to defend the truth." Marcus presented it with irrefutable logic, exposing the corruption and injustice in crystal-clear terms. The judge, a woman known for her strict impartiality, watched intently. Murmurs in the courtroom increased as the defense's inconsistencies became evident. Even the previously skeptical reporters took admiring notes. At a critical moment, one of the executives tried to ridicule Marcus in front of the jury. How could a young lawyer understand the intricacies of high technology and our internal procedures? Marcus gave a slight smile and replied calmly, "Your Honor, the law is not a matter of age, but of truth. And the truth is that these employees were wronged. Technical complexity cannot serve as a cover for injustice." This response caused a sensation. The attentive jury began to question the arrogant defense. The evidence Marcus had accumulated was indisputable, and every attempt at manipulation on the part of the company was carefully dismantled. When Marcus concluded his argument, he did so with quiet power. Justice is not measured by the size of a company, nor by the wealth or power of those who try to hijack it. It is measured by the ability of a lawyer, even a young and inexperienced one in the eyes of some, to defend those who have no one to defend them. Silence reigned for a few seconds, before a murmur of respect and admiration spread through the room. Reporters exchanged incredulous glances, the jury seemed captivated, and even the opposing lawyers could no longer hide their frustration. Marcus had once again demonstrated that his intelligence, preparation, and courage could turn the most hopeless situations around. The verdict was approaching, and for the injured employees, hope was being restored. The courtroom was silent as the judge rose to deliver the verdict. Every eye was on Marcus Williams and his clients, the unjustly dismissed employees. The atmosphere was charged with tension, but also with hope. After carefully reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments of both sides, the judge began, his voice echoing throughout the room, "It is clear that the dismissals were based on falsified information and discriminatory practices." A murmur ran through the room. The employees held hands, their eyes shining with emotion. Therefore, the judge continued, "These employees will be reinstated with all corresponding rights and compensation, and the company will be held responsible for its actions." A burst of relief and joy rippled through the room. The employees rose, some in tears, to their feet, embracing Marcus in grateful embraces. The young black lawyer had once again turned a hopeless situation into a resounding victory. The media quickly spread the news across the country. Marcus Williams, the young prodigy who defies the giants, ran the headlines. His name became synonymous with courage, intelligence, and justice. Despite this sudden fame, Marcus remained humble. He knew that every victory was not only his own, but that of those who had believed in him and in justice. He continued to work on new cases, guided by the same conviction, to defend those who had no one to defend them. Later, as he left the courthouse, Marcus watched the city stretch out before him. Every skyscraper, every glittering light, seemed to symbolize a challenge to be met, an injustice to be corrected. And he knew, with a quiet certainty, that this was only the beginning of an exceptional career. The young black prodigy lawyer had left the judge speechless, but more than that, he had proven that determination, courage, and truth could change the world, one trial at a time.